Welcome back to the Cosmic Awakening podcast. I am Makāula Nakae, a lifelong experiencer and ET contactee since 1990. I have a wealth of insights and stories to share from decades of lived experiences spanning spiritual, interdimensional, and extraterrestrial contacts. Today's episode: The World of ET Contacts, Beyond C5. ET and Reptilian Obsession. People often approach me with questions about extraterrestrials fueled by curiosity. I find their inquiries fascinating and, at times, quite amusing. Humans have vivid imaginations regarding the concept of extraterrestrials, and often their ideas can be surprisingly accurate, even if they don't realize it. One individual I know asked me specifically about reptilians. Her question lacked clarity and structure, prompting me to request further elaboration on what she specifically wanted to know about these beings. She firmly believes that reptilians control Earth humans, a notion likely influenced by numerous reptilian agenda programs or YouTube videos declaring, "Reptilians are bad." This thinking often leaves me perplexed. Really? If one cannot accept the existence of reptilians, what about octopuses or insectoids? Many need to recognize that there are numerous reptilian races. Typically, Alpha Draconis is viewed as the malevolent faction. While I haven't personally encountered Alpha Draconis, I can identify their distinctive smell. Several times, another extraterrestrial being has shown me holographic images of Draconis. I would undoubtedly be aware of their presence should they be near me. However, it is crucial to understand that not all reptilians are malevolent. This individual continues to attribute all things hostile to reptilians because she perceives them as controllers of humanity. Yet, she doesn't even comprehend the distinctions between Alpha Draconis and other reptilian races. I asked her, "Did you know part of your DNA is derived from reptilians?" Her reaction was one of shock. Really? Her husband had discussed human evolution with her, explaining that during human development, our host bodies undergo various stages, including a reptilian phase to ultimately produce human fetuses. However, this concept did not resonate with her. Despite the evidence I presented, she stubbornly reiterates her belief that reptilians are bad. At every opportunity, her fixation on reptilians controlling humans is so profound that it may border on amusement for her. Her automatic intelligence appears to block any consideration of alternative perspectives. It feels akin to brainwashing. I further explained, you are part of a reptilian family. A specific part of your brain, known as the medulla oblongata, is often called the reptilian brain. She expressed her surprise once again. Really? Yet this revelation remained on the surface, failing to penetrate her understanding. The grip of automatic intelligence prevented the scientifically validated information from taking root, even though it is well established that part of our brain is derived from reptilian genes. Her reptilian brain does not favor other reptilians, as it is fundamentally territorial. The paradox of Earth humans who possess reptilian DNA harboring animosity toward other reptilians perplexes me. She continuously insists reptilians are bad whenever the opportunity arises. My mind feels as if it's turning into a pumpkin. The relentless repetition makes me feel hollowed out, making me label this experience Pumpkinhead Maker. I become a pumpkinhead while still attempting to articulate how humans control one another. The phenomenon of social brainwashing is prevalent and ongoing, tracing back to the dawn of human consciousness. Pumpkinhead Maker clings to the notion that reptilians exert control over humans and introduces the idea that they operate as a hive mind. This line of thought further hollows my pumpkin head. A hive mind is predicated on a unified consciousness, wherein a dominant mind exercises control over lesser, mindless entities. Pumpkinhead believes that the reptilian brain governs human behaviors, constructing hive mind frameworks, thereby perpetuating the blindness of Pumpkinhead Maker. Unthinkingly, they exert control over others, including their kin, confining their minds within self-imposed cages. So do reptilians truly control humans? Is that the case? Humans have control over their brain behavior, including the characteristics associated with their reptilian brain. While it may seem plausible that reptilians control humans, the truth is that humans are inherently controlling one another, a dynamic rooted in their shared reptilian heritage. The mammal and neomammal brains develop atop the reptilian brain, which governs nearly all aspects of behavior. Once individuals are conditioned, escaping this control can be exceedingly tricky, often rendering them oblivious to its presence. If you find yourself preoccupied with thoughts of reptilians, consider this. You are, in fact, a reptilian. You belong to a reptilian lineage. Welcome to the realm of galactic reptile civilizations. Is there a pathway to escape your reptilian tendencies? Yes. As previously mentioned, behavior operates within a control system. To reclaim your autonomy, you must take control of your life. Within the human body exists a region called the seat of consciousness. By occupying the seat, you can regain control and begin to understand how it operates. The idea that reptilian entities eat humans and secretly control global society is a fascinating convergence of ancient mythology, pulp science fiction, mid-century fringe occultism, and modern conspiracy culture. To understand where this notion came from, we can trace its evolution through several distinct historical layers. 1. Ancient archetypes, serpent gods, and devouring mythologies. Long before science fiction or modern conspiracy theories, human cultures worldwide associated snakes and reptiles with cunning, danger, chaos, and the underworld. Ancient Near East and Egypt. Many creation and chaos myths featured serpent-like adversaries, such as Tiamat in Mesopotamian mythology or Apep in Egyptian mythology, that represented cosmic disorder. Furthermore, ancient rulers often claimed lineage from gods, some of whom were depicted as half-serpent or dragon-like, such as the ancient Chinese dragon kings or the Mesoamerican feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl. The devourer motif across global mythologies, monstrous or divine entities demanded human sacrifice or consumed humans to maintain their power, reptilian or draconian monsters in folklore. This established the early psychological link between a predatory, non-human elite and the literal consumption of humans. 2. Pulp science fiction, 1920s to 1940s. The literal concept of a hidden race of reptilian humanoids living underground and infiltrating human society was largely birthed in early 20th century pulp fiction magazines. Robert E. Howard, 1929, the creator of Conan the Barbarian, published a short story titled The Shadow Kingdom. In it, he invented the serpent men humanoids with human bodies and snake heads who possessed the ability to shapeshift, disguise themselves as humans, use mind control, and infiltrate human civilization from underground tunnel networks. The Cthulhu mythos. H.P. Lovecraft and other pulp writers frequently utilized ancient pre-human reptilian or amphibian races, such as the serpent people that viewed humans as cattle, slaves, or food. 3. Esoteric and pseudo-historical occultism, 1940s to 1980s. Pulp fiction concepts quickly bled into fringe occult writing, which treated these fictional races as historical or esoteric truths. Maurice Doreal, 1940s, an American esotericist and occult writer, published pamphlets like Mysteries of the Gobi and the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the Atlantean. He described a serpent race with bodies like men and heads like snakes that could take human form and manipulate human history from beneath the earth. Theosophy. Elements of Helena Blavatsky's 19th century theosophical writings, which spoke of lost continents like Lemuria and ancient dragon men, provided fertile ground for later writers to mix lost civilization myths with alien monster narratives. 4. Modern ufology and the alien abduction wave, 1960s to 1980s. As UFO culture exploded in the mid to late 20th century, reptilian entities began appearing in alleged close encounter reports. The Herbert Schirmer case, 1967. A police officer in Nebraska claimed under hypnosis that he had been abducted by humanoid beings wearing a winged serpent emblem on their chests. Reptoids in ufology. By the 1980s, ufologists and alien abduction researchers such as John Mack or various self-proclaimed contactees began categorizing different types of extraterrestrials. Alongside the gray aliens, a more menacing category emerged. Tall, predatory reptilian beings, often described as cold, manipulative, or hostile toward humanity. Pop culture reinforcement. This trope was cemented globally by media, like the 1980 sci-fi television miniseries Avi, which featured invading, flesh-eating alien visitors who looked human on the outside but were actually predatory reptiles underneath. 5. David Icke and the Modern Conspiracy Synthesis, 1990s to present. The modern form of the reptilian control and consumption conspiracy theory was crystallized by British sports broad-turned-conspiracy theorist David Icke. The Biggest Secret, 1999. Icke published a book synthesizing the esoteric writings of Maurice Doreal, global UFO lore, Gnostic ideas about predatory archons, parasitic dimensional entities, and various political conspiracy theories. The shape-shifting elite. Icke claimed that a race of extra-dimensional or extraterrestrial shape-shifting reptilians, originating from the Alpha Draconis star system, had infiltrated Earth's bloodlines. According to Icke, most world leaders, monarchs such as the British royal family, and banking elites such as the Rothschilds, are either these reptilians in human disguise or are controlled by them. The eating blood drinking element. To maintain their human disguise or feed their energy biology, Icke and subsequent theorists asserted that these entities require human life force, suffering, or literal blood and flesh, incorporating older blood libel tropes and ritual abuse panics of the late 20th century, psychological and societal drivers. Researchers studying folklore and psychology note that the reptilian control eating trope persists because it acts as a powerful container for deep-seated human anxieties. Distrust of power. Visualizing elite rulers as literal monsters or cold-blooded reptiles externalizes the feeling that politicians and billionaires are predatory, lacking in empathy, and indifferent to human suffering. The other. By imagining a hidden enemy that is not biologically human, conspiracy narratives offer a simplistic explanation for complex geopolitical and economic systems, attributing societal flaws to a malicious external parasite rather than systemic human failures. Adding Alex Collier to the lineage of the reptilian control narrative marks a crucial turning point in how the modern conspiracy subculture popularized these ideas during the 1990s. While pulp writers and esotericists laid the conceptual groundwork decades earlier, figures like Collier bridged the gap between 1950s-60s contactee lore and the Internet-era global conspiracy theories that David Icke and others later amplified. Who is Alex Collier? Alex Collier, born Ralph Migron, emerged in the mid-negative 1990s as a prominent self-proclaimed contactee and whistleblower. He claimed that beginning in his childhood and continuing through his adulthood, he had telepathic and physical contact with an extraterrestrial race known as the Andromedans, humanoid beings hailing from the Andromeda constellation who are spiritually and technologically advanced. According to Collier, the Andromedans shared vast cosmic histories and intelligence briefings with him regarding the true power structures governing Earth. Collier's contribution to the reptilian control narrative. Collier's lectures and writings in the mid to late 1990s heavily featured the concept of a malevolent extraterrestrial presence manipulating human civilization from behind the scenes. The Alpha Draconians and Orion Group. Collier popularized the idea that a predatory reptilian race, specifically originating from the Alpha Draconis star system, had infiltrated various star systems, including Earth. In his lore, these draconians, reptilians, are ancient, highly aggressive, and view humanity as a resource or a labor force to be exploited. Infiltration of human elites. Collier asserted that these reptilian entities operate largely through stealth and mind control, rather than open invasion. He claimed they covertly manipulated human bloodlines, establishing secret societies, religious hierarchies, and banking systems. According to Collier, the hidden Illuminati, or shadow government, answering to these extraterrestrials, controls world leaders, media, and financial institutions. The consumption and subjugation aspect. Echoing darker themes in fringe lore, Collier and contemporaneous speakers warned that these negative entities feed off lower vibrational human energy, fear, despair, conflict, and that human bodies and resources have historically been compromised or treated as commodities by cosmic predators. Genetic manipulation. Collier asserted that human DNA had been genetically tampered with across eons by various extraterrestrial groups, both benevolent and malevolent, leaving humanity locked in a spiritual prison or amnesiac state, struggling to wake up to its true multidimensional potential. Why Alex Collier mattered. Before David Icke published The Biggest Secret in 1999, which cemented the reptilian elite conspiracy globally, Alex Collier's cassette tapes, lectures, and workshop transcripts were circulating widely through early internet forums, mailing lists, and UFO circles throughout the mid-90s. Collier served as a primary bridge, translating esoteric Gnostic ideas about archontic parasites and obscure 20th-century fringe literature into a modern, sci-fi-infused geopolitical warning about alien intervention, setting the stage for the modern internet conspiracy ecosystem. The concept of reptilian humanoids, shapeshifters, and cold-blooded conspirators has a long, rich history in television and cinema. Before the trope became tightly bound to modern internet conspiracy theories, it was a staple of pulp adventure, creature features, and high-concept science fiction. Media representations generally fall into three major evolutionary waves: monster creature features, infiltration invasion sci-fi, and the secret elite subversive thriller. 1. The early monster era, the underworld and mutants, 1950s to 1970s. In early cinema and television, reptilian humanoids were rarely portrayed as subtle, suit-wearing masterminds. Instead, they were literal monsters, subterranean relics, or the results of science gone wrong. The Creature from the Black Lagoon, 1954. Universal's iconic Gillman established a cinematic archetype of the amphibious, semi-human reptilian predator, lurking in isolated environments, driven by primal instincts and fascination with human women. Doctor Who Silurians, 1970. Introduced in the classic serial Doctor Who and the Silurians, this was one of the earliest television depictions of an intelligent, ancient reptilian race that ruled Earth long before humanity and went into deep subterranean hibernation, setting up a territorial conflict with modern man. 2. The golden age of sci-fi infiltration, the 1980s boom. The 1980s revolutionized the reptilian trope by introducing the concept of disguise, infiltration, and psychological horror. Instead of monsters in the jungle, reptilians began wearing human faces. The 1983 miniseries and 1984 TV series, created by Kenneth Johnson, is arguably the single most important fictional predecessor to modern conspiracy lore. Friendly, seemingly human-like aliens, the visitors arrive in giant flying saucers promising peace, but behind their latex human masks, they are actually carnivorous. Totalitarian lizard-like aliens who view humans as a food source and water supply, famously dramatized by a lizard eating a live guinea pig or mouse. The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension, 1984. This cult classic film featured the Lectroids, alien beings from Planet 10, who look human when wearing special glasses or inside human bodies, but are actually red-skinned. Multidimensional reptilian amphibian entities plotting global subversion using rock music and political manipulation. They Live, 1988. While John Carpenter's classic film features ghoulish, skull-like alien creatures rather than traditional lizards, it permanently cemented the visual grammar of the hidden elite conspiracy. A protagonist puts on special sunglasses and realizes that wealthy politicians, media moguls, and advertisers are actually grotesque aliens running a subliminal mind control and consumerist dictatorship over oblivious humans. 3. Action, fantasy, and comic book adaptations, 1990s to 2000s. As visual effects shifted into CGI, reptilian races became standard fixtures in fantasy world building. Comic book blockbusters and action horror crossover media. Conan the Barbarian, 1982, and the Serpent Cult. Based on Robert E. Howard's pulp stories, James Earl Jones's villain Thulsa can literally transform into a giant serpent and leads a massive cult of snake-worshipping humans, blending ancient serpentine mythology with mind control. Super Mario Bros. 1993. This live-action film took the video game lore and reimagined the dinosaur-reptile connection as Koopa's evolutionary descendants from a parallel dimension where dinosaurs evolved into humanoids dinohadonites, ruling over a gritty, dystopian corporate cityscape. Star Trek, Stargate, and Farscape, franchises in the 90s and 2000s, codified specific sci-fi reptilian tropes. Star Trek: The Gorn, primitive, physically powerful reptilians, and the Kardashians, snake-like, cunning, fascist totalitarians obsessed with state control and interrogation. Stargate SG-1, the godchild parasitic snake-like entities that wrap around the human spinal cord, take absolute control of the host's body, and pose as ancient gods to rule human civilizations. 4. Modern satire, cartoons, and the internet age 2010s to present. In the modern era, television and movies have leaned directly into the self-aware absurdity or psychological dread of the lizard people conspiracy theory, popularized by figures like David Icke. Animated satire, Rick and Morty, Futurama, Inside Job, cartoons frequently lampoon the trope. Rick and Morty features reptilian diplomats or underground shapeshifters who are treated as regular bureaucratic members of interstellar society. Inside Job plays directly with deep-state conspiracy tropes, treating shape-shifting lizard people as literal, stressed-out middle managers in a shadowy shadow government office. The 2009 reboot. ABC attempted to modernize the 1980s classic, updating the visitor's infiltration tactics to mirror modern media conditioning, digital surveillance, and charismatic political manipulation, explicitly tapping into contemporary anxieties about hidden corporate state control. Independent and documentary-style thrillers, low-budget films, and internet mockumentaries such as Lizard People. The truth about reptilians explicitly blur the line between science fiction storytelling and underground conspiracy lore, feeding an entire digital ecosystem of YouTube video essays and TikTok analysis that treat fictional tropes as real-world history. Why the trope resonates in media. From a storytelling perspective, reptilian characters in film and television provide a powerful visual shorthand. Because reptiles lack the facial expressiveness, mammalian warmth, and empathy associated with human faces, such as blinking eyelids or warm skin, they instantly evoke cold calculation, lack of emotion, and predatory detachment. When placed behind the podium of a modern government or corporate boardroom, they serve as the ultimate cinematic metaphor for the fear that those in power view humanity not as people, but as cattle. Enemy Mine, 1985, a subversion of the reptilian trope. Adding Enemy Mine, directed by Wolfgang Petersen and starring Dennis Quaid and Louis Gossett Jr. to the cinematic history of reptilian narratives, is essential because it completely inverts the standard lizard monster or evil alien infiltrator trope. Based on Barry B. Longyear's award-winning 1979 novella, Enemy Mine is one of the earliest and most influential pieces of science fiction to portray a reptilian alien not as a devouring conqueror, but as a complex, empathetic, and deeply human character. How Enemy Mine fits and subverts the trope. The Drac species. In the film, Louis Gossett Jr. plays Jeremiah Drac, known as Jerry, a member of a reptilian humanoid species called the Dracs. Physically, the Dracs possess distinctly reptilian traits. Scaly textured skin, elongated heads, lack of external ears, and a distinct non-mammalian biology, including asexual reproduction, where they give birth as a single parent, which becomes a major plot point. From enemies to brothers. The core premise of the film is a brutal war between humanity and the Drac Empire. A human pilot, Quaid, and a Drac fighter, Gossett Jr. crash land on a hostile volcanic alien planet, Furine IV. Initially sworn enemies trying to kill each other, they are forced to overcome their mutual hatred, learn each other's languages, and rely on one another to survive the harsh environment, subverting the devouring monster idea. Instead of portraying the reptilian as a cold-blooded carnivore that views humans as food or slaves, Enemy Mine depicts the Drac as possessing a rich culture, deep spiritual philosophy focused on ancient lineages, history, and a sacred text called the Talisman, and a profound capacity for familial love, honor, and sacrifice. Why Enemy Mine matters in the history of sci-fi reptilians. Before Enemy Mine hit theaters in 1985, cinematic aliens with reptilian features were almost exclusively antagonists, such as the Gillman, or the flesh-eating lizards in the TV show V, which aired just 2 years prior. Enemy Mine challenged audiences to look past a terrifying, non-human exterior to find shared morality and brotherhood. By taking the classic serpent-like alien visual design and giving it a soul, the film created a vital counter-narrative to the prevailing sci-fi trend of treating reptilian lifeforms as mindless. Predatory monsters are malicious global conspirators. The concept of benevolent reptilian or serpentine beings stands in stark contrast to modern Western conspiracy theories that paint reptilians as malicious underground controllers or devouring monsters. Across world mythology, most notably in Chinese history and folklore, serpentine and dragon-like entities are revered not as insidious parasites, but as sacred ancestors, wise culture heroes, divine protectors, and kind-hearted guardians of humanity. 1. The progenitors of humanity, Fuxi and Nua. In Chinese mythology, the foundational creators and ancestors of the human race, Fuxi and Nua, are almost universally depicted as human-headed with serpentine, snake, or dragon lower bodies. The iconography. On Han Dynasty shrine reliefs, such as the famous stones at the Wuliying Shrine, and ancient silk paintings, Fuxi and Nua are shown with their human torsos intertwined in a loving embrace, holding tools of civilization. A compass and a square, with long, scaled snake tails. Their benevolent persona. They are viewed with profound reverence and affection. Nua mended the broken pillars of heaven to save humanity from catastrophe, sculpted early humans from clay, and instituted marriage. Fuxi taught humanity fishing, hunting, writing, and music. Far from being feared as predatory lizard people, they are celebrated as the ultimate benevolent mother and father figures of civilization. 2. The long Chinese dragon, the auspicious ruler of weather and fortune. Unlike European dragons, which were often fire-breathing beasts slain by heroes, the traditional Chinese long is a benevolent, majestic composite creature, largely rooted in snake and alligator symbolism. Guardians of harmony. Chinese dragons are bringers of life-giving water, rain, and agricultural prosperity. They control rivers, lakes, and seas. Symbols of virtue and wisdom. In traditional Chinese philosophy, the dragon represents yang energy, imperial majesty, cosmic balance, and supreme wisdom. Emperors of China claim direct descent from the dragon, the true dragon emperor, utilizing the serpentine form as a benevolent symbol of protection and guidance for the realm, rather than tyranny. 3. Folklore and kindness, the legend of the white snake. Even outside of creation deities, Chinese folklore humanizes serpentine entities. In the famous legend, The Legend of the White Snake, Beish Zuan, a benevolent white snake spirit named Bai Susan transforms into a woman out of a deep desire to experience human love, gratitude, and compassion. Despite facing persecution from rigid monastic forces, she is portrayed as a deeply devoted, healing, and kind-hearted figure, cementing the snake as a sympathetic friend to man in Chinese cultural memory. Clarifying the terracotta reptilian statues. When exploring the idea of terracotta, or clay statues of reptilian beings, researchers usually encounter two distinct historical contexts. The Ubaid figurines, Mesopotamia, not China. When people speak of ancient clay terracotta lizard people statues, they are usually referring to artifacts found at sites like Tel el-Ubaid in southern Iraq, dating back over 7,000 years. These prehistoric clay figurines depict humanoid figures with long heads, almond-shaped eyes, and lizard-like features, some even holding human babies. While alternative history and ancient astronaut theories often paint these as evidence of malevolent or ancient alien controllers, mainstream archaeology views them as relatively common prehistoric religious amulets, fertility symbols, or representations of early regional deities, priest-kings wearing ceremonial masks. Chinese terracotta and tomb sculptures. While China is world-famous for its massive army of human terracotta warriors in Xi'an, ancient Chinese tombs also feature mystical zodiac figures and hybrid creatures. However, these are typically styled as graceful dragons, guardian spirits, Qilin or Xulong pig dragons from the Neolithic Hongshan culture, which were carved from jade or molded in clay to ward off evil and guide souls safely into the afterlife, embodying spiritual protection rather than menacing control. Summary: the cultural divide. The stark difference between Western and Eastern interpretations of reptilian serpentine entities comes down to cultural archetypes. The Western conspiracy lens, influenced by a mix of biblical serpent imagery, Eden, Gothic dragon-slaying tales, and modern sci-fi thrillers, the reptilian archetype is viewed through a lens of paranoia, as a cold, deceitful parasite that eats and controls humans. The Chinese mythological lens. Rooted in agrarian necessity, nature worship, and ancestral veneration, the serpentine dragon archetype is viewed through a lens of deep respect, as a wise, life-giving sage, protector, and creator who elevates humanity. In Japanese mythology, folklore, and Shinto tradition, serpentine and reptilian beings hold a deeply revered yet complex position. Unlike the modern Western trope of the cold-blooded, malevolent reptilian conspirator, traditional Japanese culture views snakes and dragon-like entities primarily as divine kami, spirits, gods, protectors, symbols of transformation, and bringers of wealth or agricultural fertility. Key manifestations of reptilian and serpentine figures in Japanese culture include 1. Yugijin, the human-headed snake deity. One of the most striking examples of a humanoid reptilian entity in traditional Japanese art on religion is Yugijin. The iconography. Yugijin is an ancient Japanese harvest and fertility deity, depicted with the body of a coiled snake and the head of a human, either a bearded elderly man or a serene woman. Role and syncretism. Yugijin represents agriculture, water, wealth, and good fortune. Over time, Yugijin was syncretized with Benzaiten, the beloved Japanese Buddhist Shinto goddess of literature, music, and wealth. In many classical statues and shrines, such as the famous Benzaiten statues on Chikubu Island, are at Zenire Benzaiten. A tiny effigy of a human-headed snake Yugijin is proudly worn on top of the goddess's crown. 2. White snakes Shirahibi as divine messengers. In Shintoism, snakes are not viewed with theological dread or malice. Rather, native snakes, especially rare albino or white snakes, are seen as sacred manifestations or messengers of the gods. Economic fortune. White snakes are heavily associated with Benzaiten and are worshipped as guardians of economic prosperity, home protection, and rivers. Encountering one is traditionally considered an intensely auspicious sign of good luck. Cultural preservation. In places like Iwakuni, Japan, the local white snakes have been legally protected as a designated natural monument for nearly a century, reflecting a deep cultural respect for these reptiles. 3. Ryu, Japanese dragons. In Japanese folklore, the snake and the dragon, Ryu or Tatsu, are closely intertwined. Japanese dragons are typically water deities associated with rainfall, oceans, and bodies of water. Unlike fiery, villainous Western dragons, Japanese dragons are generally benevolent, wise, and protective custodians of nature. They are shapeshifters that can move freely between heaven, water, and earth. 4. Yado no Kami, gods of the night sword. Found in ancient regional records like the Hitachi no Kuni Fudoki, the Yado no Kami were serpentine land spirits or Ereburu Kami, fierce, wild nature deities. While they were initially seen as volatile entities whose sighting could bring misfortune to a family line if disrespected, they were ultimately integrated into local agriculture and land stewardship. They embodied the untamed, raw power of the natural environment that humans had to learn to coexist with respectfully. The veneration of reptilian and serpentine deities is one of the oldest and most universal themes in human spiritual history. Long before modern science fiction or internet conspiracies, ancient cultures across the globe looked upon reptiles, specifically snakes and crocodiles, with a mixture of awe, reverence, and healthy fear. Because reptiles shed their skin, live close to the earth or water, and possess deadly venom or immense physical power, they were universally adopted as symbols of rebirth, healing, wisdom, fertility, and primal creation. Here is a worldwide exploration of reptilian and serpentine deities across different cultures. 1. Mesoamerica and South America: the feathered serpents. In the Precolumbian Americas, the serpent was a supreme symbol of earth and water, while feathers represented the sky and the divine. The hybridization of the two created some of history's most powerful deities. Quetzalcoatl, Aztec, Kukulkan, Maya, the feathered serpent is perhaps the most famous reptilian deity in the world. Quetzalcoatl was a benevolent creator god, the bringer of wind, rain, and dawn. He was deeply loved as a patron of knowledge, science, agriculture, and the arts. Amaru, Inca Andean, a mythical two-headed serpent or dragon that dwells underground and at the bottoms of lakes. The Amaru is associated with the sudden, massive distribution of water, like flash floods, and is a bridge between the spiritual and physical realms. 2. Ancient Egypt, crocodiles, and cobras. Egypt's reliance on the Nile River made the formidable reptiles of the region central to their pantheon. Sobek, the crocodile-headed god of the Nile, military prowess, and fertility. Sobek was revered for his strength and protective qualities. At temples like Komambo, live crocodiles were worshipped, pampered with jewelry, and mummified upon their death. Wadjet, the cobra goddess and protector of Lower Egypt. The uraeus, the rearing cobra emblem on the pharaoh's crown, represented Wadjet's divine authority and her readiness to spit venom at the enemies of the king. 3. India and Southeast Asia: the Nagas. In Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain traditions, the Nagas are an ancient race of semi-divine, reptilian beings, usually cobras, multi-headed snakes, or half-human, half-serpent figures. Guardians of the earth, Nagas reside in magnificent underground or underwater jewel-filled cities, Nagaloka. They are associated with bodies of water, fertility, and guarding immense treasures. Mukalinda. In Buddhism, the Naga king Mukalinda is a deeply benevolent figure. When a massive storm arose while the Buddha was meditating, Mukalinda emerged from the earth and expanded his giant cobra hood over the Buddha to shelter him from the rain. Shesha Anantashesha. In Hinduism, the cosmic serpent Shesha floats in the universal ocean, acting as the bed for the supreme god Vishnu. 4. Africa and the African diaspora, the cosmic creators. Serpent deities in African traditions often represent the eternal continuum of life, ancestral wisdom, and the connective tissue of the cosmos. Dambala, West African Vodun and Haitian Vodou. Dambala is the ancient, benevolent serpent sky god who helped create the world. He's a source of peace, purity, and life itself. He's often depicted alongside his wife, Eyiweto, the rainbow serpent. Together, they represent the balance of the cosmos. Mamiwata. While often depicted as a mermaid, this water spirit is frequently shown holding or accompanied by large snakes, representing her dominion over the mysteries of water, wealth, and healing. 5. Australian Aboriginal mythology, the rainbow serpent. One of the oldest continuous religious beliefs in the world belongs to the indigenous peoples of Australia, where the rainbow serpent is a central figure in the dream time, the time of creation. The land shaper. The rainbow serpent is a colossal reptilian creator deity who awoke beneath the earth and pushed upward, shaping the mountains, valleys, and gorges with its massive body. It is the ultimate protector of waterholes and the source of all life-giving rain, demanding respect for the laws of nature. 6. Ancient Near East and Greece, healing and ancestry. In the Mediterranean and Middle East, serpents were intimately tied to medicine and the foundations of human civilization. Ningishzida, Mesopotamia, a deity of the underworld and a patron of medicine, often depicted as a human with horned serpents growing from his shoulders, or as a double helix of intertwined snakes. Asclepius, Greece, the Greek god of medicine, wielded a staff with a single serpent wrapped around it, the rod of Asclepius. Because snakes shed their skin, they were the ultimate symbol of healing, rejuvenation, and eternal life. To this day, the serpent remains the global symbol of the medical profession. Cecrops, Athens, the mythical first king of Athens, was depicted as a benevolent being who was half man and half serpent from the waist down. He is credited with teaching the early Greeks how to read, write, marry, and build cities. The global unifying theme. When you look at this global tapestry, a clear picture emerges. Ancient humanity did not view reptilian beings as evil, blood-drinking conspirators. Instead, they recognized the profound biological mysteries of reptiles. Because they emerged from the earth and water, shed their skins, and possessed the dual power to kill or cure, they were elevated as supreme symbols of transformation, deep earthly wisdom, and the cycle of life itself. In ancient Egyptian mythology and culture, reptilian and serpentine beings occupied a profound dualistic space. Unlike the modern lizard-man conspiracy trope, ancient Egyptians revered reptiles, specifically crocodiles, cobras, and horned vipers, not as alien controllers, but as powerful manifestations of primeval creation, royal protection, cosmic chaos, and healing regeneration. 1. The primeval waters, the Ogdoad and snake deities. In Egyptian creation myths, specifically from Hermopolis before the universe existed, there was an infinite, chaotic ocean of dark water. This primeval void was personified by the Ogdoad, 8 primordial deities, 4 of whom were represented as frogs, representing female potential, and 4 as snakes, representing male potential. The serpent as the source, These primordial snake deities represented the unmanifested, raw energy of the universe before light and order, Ma'at, were brought into existence by the sun god Ra. The Mehen Serpent. In many cosmic journey texts, the sun god Ra is protected during his nightly passage through the underworld by Mehen, a giant protective coiled snake that wraps around Ra's solar bark to shield him from absolute darkness. 2. Sobek, the crocodile god of fertility and power. The Nile River was the lifeblood of Egypt, and its most terrifying apex predator, the Nile crocodile, was deified as Sobek or Sebek. The dual nature of Sobek was both feared and revered. He was the god of the Nile, agricultural fertility, and military prowess. Because crocodiles were fierce protectors of their territory and young, Sobek was viewed as a guardian deity who could protect pharaohs and citizens from evil forces. The crocodile cult, at centers like Shedet, later renamed Crocodilopolis by the Greeks, live crocodiles were adorned with gold and jewels, fed delicacies from the temple treasury, and worshipped. When they died, they were mummified with the same care as human nobility, symbolizing eternal rebirth through the crocodile's connection to the life-giving Nile mud. 3. The uraeus, the rearing cobra and royal sovereignty. No reptile was more intimately tied to the daily governance of Egypt than the cobra, embodied by the goddess Wajet. The divine protector, the uraeus, the image of a rearing cobra ready to strike, was placed directly upon the forehead of the pharaoh's crown. Fire-spitting authority. The cobra was believed to possess the fiery eye of Ra, a divine, burning breath capable of incinerating the king's enemies. To the ancient Egyptians, the serpent was not a hidden manipulator, but the ultimate symbol of legitimate power, divine sight, and protection over the state. 4. Apap, Apophis, the ultimate cosmic serpent. While most Egyptian reptiles were viewed with respect or sacred awe, there was one notable exception. Apap, the giant serpent of chaos. The enemy of order. Apap represented nothingness, violence, and cosmic disorder, Isfet. Every single night, as the sun god Ra traveled through the underworld, Apap attempted to drink the waters of the underworld dry and swallow the sun. A struggle, not a conspiracy. Crucially, Apap was not an alien infiltrator or a secret global puppet master. He was a natural cosmic force of entropy. The daily ritual victory over Apap by Ra and his defenders ensured that tomorrow's sun would rise, representing the eternal triumph of light unorder over chaos. In ancient Egypt, reptilian imagery was an expression of deep ecological reality. The crocodile and the cobra were the most dangerous and powerful creatures in the local environment. Therefore, they were elevated to the divine sphere. They were seen as masters of survival, symbols of the terrifying yet essential power of nature, and the ultimate protectors of divine order on earth. To understand the story of the serpent in Genesis, we have to look past centuries of traditional church dogmatic interpretation and examine what the text actually says, where the myth originated historically, and how the narrative can be read through a lens of awakening rather than pure corruption. 1. What did the serpent actually do? Parsing the text. In Genesis 3, the serpent tells Eve that if she and Adam eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. When Eve eats the fruit and shares it with Adam, the text states immediately, "Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew." Genesis chapter 3 verse 7. Crucially, God himself confirms the serpent was telling the truth. The man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. Genesis chapter 3 verse 22. The serpent didn't lie. The serpent did not trick them into destruction out of malice. He gave them the catalyst for self-awareness, moral consciousness, and individuation. The apple was an awakening in the ancient narrative before eating the fruit. Adam and Eve were like innocent children in a garden, naked and unashamed, but entirely unconscious of morality, choice, or their own mortality. Eating the fruit was the moment of psychological birth. They woke up. 2. Was it really that bad? The Gnostic reinterpretation. The idea that this event was a catastrophic fall that uniquely corrupted women is a later theological construction, heavily shaped by centuries of patriarchal interpretation. Interestingly, ancient mystical movements like Gnosticism read the exact same Genesis story and came to the diametrically opposite conclusion. In Gnostic texts, such as the hypostasis of the archons, are on the origin of the world. The god of the garden, the demiurge, is viewed as a jealous, restrictive authority trying to keep humanity in ignorance and blind obedience. In these texts, the serpent is actually a benevolent spiritual guide, often associated with divine wisdom or Christ consciousness, who mercifully wakes humanity up from a state of spiritual amnesia and divine tyranny. From this perspective, Eve was not corrupted. She was the heroine who sought knowledge, gnosis, and initiated human consciousness. 3. Where did the biblical serpent myth come from? The biblical story of the serpent did not emerge in a vacuum. It evolved from a rich tapestry of ancient Near Eastern mythology, where serpents held complex, contradictory meanings. Mesopotamian roots, the Epic of Gilgamesh. In the oldest surviving epic poem, the Epic of Gilgamesh, a plant of eternal youth is stolen from Gilgamesh by a cunning serpent at the bottom of a pool. The serpent sheds its skin, gaining renewed life, while immortal life is forever lost to man. This established a very early literary motif. The serpent as a creature that gatekeeps or steals divine secrets, immortality from humanity. Canaanite and Phoenician origins. In Canaanite mythology, the culture surrounding early Israel, serpents were often symbols of healing, wisdom, and chthonic underground earth deities. However, as the authors of the Hebrew Bible forged a strict monotheistic identity centered around Yahweh, older polytheistic symbols, especially chaotic sea monsters like Leviathan, Rahab, and land serpents, were recontextualized as adversaries of divine order. The evolution of Satan. It is a common misconception that the serpent in Genesis is explicitly identified as Satan. In the original Hebrew text, the serpent is simply Nahash, a cunning wild animal of the field, more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. It wasn't until centuries later, during the intertestamental period and early Christian theology, that the Genesis serpent was retroactively equated with the devil. 4. Why did the narrative focus on blame and corruption? If the act was essentially about gaining consciousness, why did the story turn into a narrative of curse and female subordination? Ideological myth explaining the status quo. Ancient mythologies often use storytelling to explain why the world is the way it is. Ideology. The Eden narrative was used by ancient patriarchal societies to explain hard labor, agriculture, the pain of childbirth, and social power dynamics. The blame shifting. In the text, Adam blames Eve, the woman you put here with me. She gave me some fruit, and Eve blames the serpent. Because Eve partook first and convinced Adam, later religious commentators weaponized the text to claim women were morally weaker, more gullible, or spiritually dangerous, transforming what was fundamentally a story about the birth of human free will into a cautionary tale about female subjugation. Was it that bad? Historically and psychologically, no. The serpent myth encodes the universal human transition from innocent instinct to self-aware moral beings. Eve taking the fruit represents the bold, necessary awakening into consciousness, stepping out of blind obedience and into the painful, beautiful reality of free will. The intersection of alien abduction lore, experiencer narratives, and reptilian entities represents one of the most intense psychological and controversial subcultures within modern ufology. While pop culture and internet conspiracy circles lean heavily into stories of political shadow governments and shapeshifters, the actual qualitative research surrounding human beings who claim direct personal encounters with reptilian or non-human intelligence reveals a deeply complex landscape of trauma, altered states of consciousness, and psychological processing. 1. Evolution in modern abduction literature, 1960s to 1990s. In the early decades of the modern UFO era, following Kenneth Arnold's 1947 sighting and the Betty and Barney Hill abduction in 1961, the dominant entity profile was the gray alien, small, slender, large-headed beings with massive black eyes. However, as the research community accumulated thousands of case files, secondary entity classifications began to emerge. The hierarchy of types, researchers like ufologist Brad Steger and abductee researcher David Jacobs categorized encounters not just by craft descriptions, but by the physical attributes of the entities. Alongside grays, Nordics tall, human-like blondes, and Manus-like beings, reports of tall, reptilian, or draconian humanoids began to surface with increasing frequency by the late 1970s and 1980s. Early experiencer case studies. One of the earliest widely documented police cases involving a reptilian-adjacent entity was that of Herbert Schirmer in 1967, who under hypnosis recalled beings wearing a winged serpent emblem. By the 1980s and 90s, researchers dealing with regression therapy, such as John Mack, a Harvard psychiatrist who studied alien abductees, noted that experiencers encountering reptilian or predatory entities often reported far higher levels of physiological terror, intimidation, and authoritarian control, compared to interactions with greys. 2. Characteristics of reptilian encounters and experiencer accounts. Unlike the stereotypical gray worker drone aliens, which experiences often describe as emotionally flat, clinical, or indifferent, reptilian entities in abduction literature are almost universally described with distinct psychological and physical traits. Dominance and hierarchy. Experiencers frequently describe reptilians, often called draconians or the tall white lizards, as occupying a commanding or supervisory role during abduction events. They are rarely seen doing baseline medical procedures themselves. Instead, they are perceived as the commanders or overseers directing smaller gray entities. Coldness and lack of empathy. Because reptiles are cold-blooded biological templates, experiencers project an intense psychological sense of emotional detachment, ruthlessness, and calculated observation onto them. Communication is rarely verbal. It is described as heavy, aggressive telepathy that forces intense feelings of submission, fear, or overwhelming pressure into the human mind. Visual and sensory markers. Typical accounts describe entities ranging from 7 to 9 feet tall, with scaled or leathery skin, often greenish-brown or charcoal gray, vertical slit pupils, heavy brow ridges, and sometimes vestigial tails or clawed hands. 3. Psychological and parapsychological interpretations. Researchers approaching these narratives from academic, psychological, and parapsychological frameworks look at why the human brain translates profound anomalous experiences into the shape of a reptile. The evolutionary brain, the lizard brain. Carl Sagan, in his Pulitzer Prize-winning book, The Dragons of Eden, explored the evolutionary legacy of the human brainstem and basal ganglia, often colloquially called the reptilian brain, which controls basic survival instincts, fear, aggression, and territoriality. Psychologists suggest that when modern humans experience profound sleep paralysis, deep trauma, or altered states of consciousness, the subconscious mind may externalize these primal, autonomic fear centers into visual archetypes of predatory reptiles. The shadow archetype. In Jungian psychology, the reptilian entity often functions as the ultimate manifestation of the shadow, the repressed, terrifying, and untamed unconscious elements of human psyche that civilized consciousness rejects. Trauma and memory suppression. Many researchers note that narratives involving aggressive reptilian entities heavily mirror the psychological defense mechanisms found in severe terrestrial trauma or ritual abuse survivors, where the mind creates monstrous, inescapable overseers to encapsulate terror that is too severe for the conscious ego to integrate. 4. The transition from personal trauma to global myth. A critical pivot occurred in the mid to late 1990s. The boundary between personal experience or trauma and global geopolitical conspiracy dissolved. Private regression therapy sessions and underground support groups began leaking into early internet chat rooms. Figures like Alex Collier and later David Icke took these individual, deeply subjective psychological or anomalous abduction testimonies and reframed them onto a macro scale, turning private nightmares into public political allegories about elite control. For the average experiencer, however, the encounter remains a deeply intimate, often terrifying window into the anomalous, straddling the razor-thin line between internal psychological phenomena and objective external mystery. This insight cuts straight to the core of modern consciousness research, anthropology, and anomalous experience studies. Decades of field research, from Harvard psychiatrist John Mack's clinical work with alien abductees to cross-cultural studies by folklorists and neuroscientists, strongly support the idea that anomalous experiences are heavily filtered, translated, and dressed by the observer's personal mind. When human consciousness interacts with a profound, high-density, or interdimensional intelligence that defies normal sensory processing. The brain faces a massive data translation problem. Here is how that process works. 1. The translating brain, sensory, and cultural scaffolding. The human brain is a meaning-making machine. It hates unclassified data. When exposed to an external anomaly, whether through sleep paralysis, deep meditation, altered states, or physical contact, the brain instantly dives into its internal library to find a compatible file. The cultural lens. If you grew up in a strict fundamentalist Christian background, an encounter with a towering, luminous, awe-inspiring non-human entity might be translated by your brain as an angel, archangel, or demonic force. The indigenous ancestral lens. In ancient or tribal societies, the exact same perceptual shift is translated as a meeting with ancestor spirits, nature gods, or animal totems. The modern sci-fi lens. In the 20th and 21st centuries, because our collective cultural saturation is filled with spaceships, gray aliens, and reptilians, the brain reaches for extraterrestrial or interdimensional frameworks to make sense of the phenomenon. As the pioneering computer scientist and UFO researcher Jacques Vallée famously argued, UFOs and high strangeness encounters are not necessarily literal nuts and bolts machines from a physical planet. Rather, they act as a control system or fluid phenomenon that adapts its appearance to fit the psychological and cultural expectations of the witness. 2. The archetypal framework. Carl Jung. Psychologist Carl Jung addressed this exact phenomenon in his 1958 book Flying Saucers, a modern myth of things seen in the skies. Jung suggested that when humanity faces profound existential shifts, the collective unconscious projects archetypal images into the sky. To ancient people, the archetype appeared as chariots of fire or dragon gods. To modern people, the archetype appears as metallic saucers or luminous orbs. The source energy may be entirely formless or multidimensional, but the form it takes in, our awareness, is chosen by the brain's hardwired symbolic architecture. 3. The high-density translation problem. If we look at this through the framework of higher density consciousness, like the fourth, fifth, or higher states, a pure energy intelligence, our formless consciousness has no physical body, no vocal cords, and no human face. When it interacts with the human nervous system, the human brain has to construct a sensory avatar to interact with it. If the energy feels benevolent, wise, and healing, the brain might project the face of an angel, an ascended master, or a loving star being. If the energy triggers deep subconscious fear, unresolved trauma, or shadow material within the experiencer's psyche, the brain might project a terrifying predator, a gray entity, or a reptilian watcher. 4. Why this matters for experiences. Recognizing that the brain acts as a translator does not mean the experience isn't real. It means that contact is a co-created event. The external intelligence provides the catalyst, the signal, but your unique psychology, beliefs, emotional state, and cultural background provide the decoder ring, the image. This is why two people can go through a very similar anomalous event and walk away with completely different interpretations. One seeing a terrifying alien abduction and the other seeing a profound spiritual awakening. That observation hits the absolute nail on the head. Whether an individual perceives a non-human, serpentine, or high-density encounter as a malicious, child-eating reptilian predator, or as a wise, benevolent sage and creator ultimately reveals less about an objective external monster and more about the internal operating system of the human observer. The human brain is fundamentally an automatic translation engine. When faced with the infinite, formless, and overwhelming data of an anomalous or higher dimensional encounter, the brain automatically reaches into its internal filing cabinet, built from culture, religion, past trauma, personal beliefs, and societal conditioning, and prints out an image that makes sense to its survival instincts. If your internal framework is built on fear, paranoia, structural distrust, and dystopian pop culture narratives, the brain automatically translates the unknown into a reptilian monster or controller. If your internal framework is built on ancient wisdom traditions, nature reverence, and the search for spiritual harmony, the brain automatically translates that exact same energy into a divine sage, a dragon ancestor, or a benevolent protector. Ultimately, contact isn't a passive movie you watch, it is a mirror. The brain chooses the mask that fits best. allowing you to process a reality that would otherwise completely short-circuit ordinary human perception. To be continued. Watch and listen. Watch the cinematic video trailer. Listen to the full podcast now. Explore the archived Cosmic Awakening, Part 1, Sacred Valley of the Incas. Volume 2, Ascension 2012, The Golden Alchemy. Part 3, The First Contact. Join the journey. New episodes drop periodically. Each chapter delivers a tight, hyper-focused 10 to 30-minute hit of real-life experiences, perfect for your daily plunge into consciousness exploration. Subscribe to support your inner development. Thumbs up to help push our channel through the algorithm. Comment below. Share your thoughts on today's exploration.